For the CBC Toronto News, I'm Dwight Drummond. His death in police custody has sparked a global call for change. In the final stop in a series of memorials, mourners gathered today to pay their final respects to George Floyd in his hometown of Houston. Stephen D'Souza has more on him and his community's loss.
Houston's Third Ward neighborhood is where George Floyd grew up, spent the majority of his life before moving to Minneapolis. And this is a rough neighborhood, and the violence is literally written on the wall of the side of the supermarket. Names of people who have died here, hearts beside the names of people who were killed in gun violence, doves beside younger children. And this is a community that knew George Floyd intimately. He was a two-sport athlete, basketball and football in high school. He also was part of a local hip-hop crew. People knew him as somebody who was a father figure to the community, somebody who wanted to make a difference. And so they see his death as a wake-up call, as something important, not just for this community, but for the world.
And look, we got a powerful angel back there. That was a powerful angel. Only an angel that power can move the world, so I want everybody to know that. When God takes one of his powerful angels, it will move the world. Because guess what? He been taking all these angels, and he ain't got y'all attention yet. So now he got the world attention, and that was a powerful angel. And his life told a story, you can tell.
We also had a chance to speak with George Floyd's uncle Roger, who, like people in the community here, has taken on the role of a spokesperson and advocate for change, something they say is very important in the wake of George Floyd's death.
I look at my nephew at this point, and it's by God's grace that he is a sacrifice to make a difference. And I believe, and I'm going to do everything in my power with whatever platform that's given me to bring about real change.
Thousands today gathered at the Family's Church in Houston for a public memorial service, a chance for the community to say goodbye to someone they saw as family. Tomorrow there will be a public service, and then there will be a procession taking the body to the burial site where he will be laid to rest beside his late mother. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, Houston.
And a Minnesota judge has set bail at $1 million US for Derek Chauvin, the Minneapolis officer charged with second-degree murder of Floyd George. Now, today was Chauvin's first court appearance by video from the state's maximum security prison. He is also charged with third-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter. If convicted, the 44-year-old faces up to 40 years in prison. 3 other officers who were present at the time have been charged with aiding and abetting murder. All 4 were fired from the Minnesota police force after Floyd's death and remain in custody.
I will relinquish my seat as Chief of Police of the Toronto Police Service. There is no way that I was going to leave this organization unless I knew that I was satisfied that the men and women of this organization were in a safe spot.
After 5 years as chief and amid calls for police reform in our city, Toronto's top cop is stepping down. Mark Saunders' term as chief wasn't due to end until next spring, but today he said he'll leave the service at the end of July. Lauren Pelly joins us live now from Toronto Police Headquarters. And Lauren, the news catching a lot of people by surprise today.
That's right, Dwight. It was quite unexpected in some ways because, as you said, he had extended his contract till next spring, almost a year away. And now his departure comes amid quite widespread unrest and questions over the future of policing in Toronto and beyond.
It is not with a heavy heart that effective July 31st of this year, I will relinquish my seat as Chief of Police of the Toronto Police Service.
A sudden announcement from the man who's been Toronto's chief of police for the last 5 years. Mark Saunders took the reins from Bill Blair in 2015, becoming Toronto's first black chief. He also inherited controversy over carding and racial profiling. Now Saunders is leaving amid huge public outcry over police brutality and anti-black racism. Just days ago, he joined protesters in taking a knee.
Right now, there's healing. That healing has to be done. But after that healing, there has to be action.
Great, you don't have a fever. His departure also comes as the city remains in the grip of COVID-19.
This is the first in recent memory in this police service that a chief has stepped down.
There is no way that I was going to leave this organization unless I knew that I was satisfied that the men and women of this organization were in a safe spot, and we're there now for that.
Saunders has been with the force for close to 4 decades, facing multiple public challenges as chief.
We cannot let this evening go without historic acknowledgement.
In 2016, an apology for the 1980s bathhouse raids.
It's not a serial killer based on the evidence.
A year later, emerging evidence of a predator in the gay village and eventual accusations that police bungled the Bruce MacArthur case. Saunders also oversaw the force during a tumultuous 2018, from the Yonge Street van attack to the deadly Danforth shooting rampage.
And this is a very difficult and challenging job anytime. But he has led those men and women for the last 5 years, working to modernize the police service and to establish community-focused policing.
Now, as calls grow to defund police, Toronto City Council could also be considering cutting millions from the force's budget. Community advocate Paul Bailey says the next chief has to forge a new course.
Where are we at in this city? We need, somebody who understands, particular issues around anti-black racism, anti-indigenous racism, and working with folks from the LGBTQ community. It's important that we have a chief that, is a community builder.
So in terms of the big question, why now? Why is he departing amid such a critical time for the Toronto police force? Well, Saunders did say today that he wants to spend more time with his family. What is clear now is whoever fills his shoes will have some major hurdles ahead right from the get-go. Dwight?
Yes, they will. Thank you for this, Lauren. Many pandemic restrictions will be lifted across most parts of Ontario starting on Friday, but not the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area. The Ford government has revealed its plan for Stage 2 of the province's reopening. Queen's Park reporter Mike Crawley now with the highlights.
After nearly 3 months of closures, in the parts of Ontario with the fewest active cases of COVID-19, businesses like these have the green light to open on Friday.
And the good news is Stage 2 will allow people to resume many parts of their daily life.
Stage 2 reopening begins Friday throughout eastern, central, and northern Ontario and much of the southwest. In those regions, you'll be able to eat outdoors at a restaurant, get a haircut, go to a shopping mall, or swim in a public pool. Campgrounds can reopen. Sightseeing tours, wine tastings, and film and TV production can resume. Not so for all of the Greater Toronto area. It stays at Stage 1 for now, along with Hamilton, Niagara, Windsor-Essex, Lambton, and Haldimand, Norfolk.
And I am confident that the rest of the province will get to Stage 2 very, very soon.
The earliest these regions could get the go-ahead, June 19th. That's a week from Friday. Meanwhile, nothing is stopping people in those parts of the province from traveling to the places with looser restrictions.
Well, we do expect that people will be moving around more now because some of the barriers have been lifted.
Some restrictions are being eased everywhere in the province as of this Friday. The maximum size of a social gathering will be increased to 10. Also, all places of worship will be allowed to open, but attendance will be limited to 30% of the building's capacity. For 2 days in a row now, the province has reported fewer than 300 new cases of COVID-19.
The smallest increase we've had yet, which is a very good sign, but we can't sit back and expect that every day. We're going to have to continue to follow it very closely.
No word today from the government about plans for child care centres to reopen, just a promise of details soon. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
And Toronto's Mayor John Tory says he supports the province's regional approach to reopening.
This is a responsible decision from provincial officials and recognizes that we must continue with this reopening in a safe manner based on principle of public health.
We will use this time to help our local businesses, such as restaurants and hair salons, and other community services and amenities, including our libraries and our pools, to best prepare to reopen when it is safe to do so.
169 new cases of COVID-19 were reported today in the city, but 57 of them are related to a delay in reporting to Toronto Public Health. For more on this, let's go live to Ali Shiasan, who is out in the junction for us tonight. And Ali, GTA is not quite ready for Stage 2 because of our infection rates are just not where they need to be right now.
That's right. So it will still be a while yet before our patios or our pools and splash pads even will be really all of that busy. It's still going to be quite a bit of time, and that is the case for us here in Toronto, the GTA, and a lot of the Golden Horseshoe, actually. And that is because we are not seeing yet a steady enough decline in the number of cases. But still, we have this new action plan for entering stage 2 of reopening in the province, and that at least gives us an idea of what that would look like. I unpacked this action plan with an expert from U of T for her take on what's safe and where we stand.
The first thing that stood out to me was something very positive, and that's the relaxation of the control measures based on regions in Ontario. What's happening in downtown Toronto is not the same as what's happening in North Bay, let's say. So I'm glad to see that that the province is taking measures to allow areas that are seeing 0 to very low incidence of COVID right now start to open back up again.
Was there anything potentially problematic in there?
The province-wide opening of worship centers. We've already seen a number of instances across the globe where singing has caused major outbreaks, even at a diminished 30% capacity that the province is recommending. I worry that this is a potentially really very risky venue for people to go and attend, because if even 1 or 2 people are infected, there's so many droplets that are sprayed about when singing, it's going to be hard to protect yourself.
And as we progress, we have to keep up our testing, and last week we had an error in some of the data that, would you say, set us back a bit?
We did recently have quite a significant glitch in test reporting that was discovered, something like 223 cases all coming in on one day, basically being reported on one day due to a data management glitch. But in fact, those cases had happened over the previous several weeks. Problems like that are not great. They are really not great for understanding what's happening in the pandemic. If you're in an area with a significant outbreak like downtown, don't start holding parties just because we see one day with the total number of infections was under 300. That might not be the case. We might find out 2 days from now that, oh, look, here's another 200 cases that happened over the previous few days that didn't get reported.
So then what should the takeaway be today?
Always be cautious and use your best judgment, and don't assume that just because something is open, that it's a 100% safe venue at all times.
And that is some good advice for anyone, regardless of what stage your community is in when it comes to reopening. And it's also something that was echoed today by provincial health officials and the Premier himself, saying that we are not out of the woods yet, so it is still ever important to follow the safety guidelines from public health, both in terms of physical distancing and sanitizing. Send it back to you, Dwight.
Yeah, slowly but surely. Thank you, Ali. With many small businesses struggling during the pandemic, the province moved today to ban their landlords from evicting them.
This is really geared for the landlords that are coming down heavy on the little business, kind of the mom and pop shop, the smaller businesses that they were going after, and I could never understand that.
The ban will be in place until the end of August. The Premier says the moratorium applies to small businesses that qualify for the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program. Last month, 5 businesses groups co-signed an open letter calling for the Ontario government to impose a commercial eviction moratorium. Now, the group said many small and medium-sized businesses were at risk of closing. The Premier had appealed to landlords to allow for grace periods on rent. Members of the Canadian military are being deployed to a Vaughan long-term care home that is struggling to contain a COVID-19 outbreak. In a letter sent to families of residents, Sienna Senior Living says the Canadian Armed Forces have been called in to help at Woodbridge Vista Care Community. The Ontario Long-Term Care Ministry says Canadian Forces members were at the home on the weekend to do an assessment. Last week, the government appointed William Osler Health System to manage the home. 22 residents of Woodbridge Vista have died from COVID-19, and last week the executive vice president of Sienna Senior Living was fired after she was overheard during a virtual meeting making disparaging remarks. The Toronto Board of Health unanimously passed a motion today to recognize anti-Black racism as a public health crisis.
44% of Black children live in poverty, compared to 15% of non-racialized children. That's a public health crisis. Black women earn 57 cents for every dollar that non-racialized men earn. That's a public health crisis. I think as the Board of Health, we have long been clear that tackling racism requires system change and behavior change.
The motion requests more equity training for members of the Board of Health and asks that black voices be prioritized when recruiting for the board. It also asks that city resources are put towards addressing the social determinants of health when it comes to anti-black racism. That includes looking at employment, education, housing, the criminal justice system, and access to health and mental health services. It was a nice one, Colette. Lots of sun during the day, cooler at night, better sleeping weather.
Yeah, you got it down there, Dwight. That's right. All those things are true. What is also true is that we're going to see a real change in our conditions as soon as tomorrow, because we go from seasonal to some real heat building in again. These are what the current temperatures look like. 23 bang on for an average high for this time of year. A little warmer in Markham at 24 and Hamilton as well, and even Kitchener coming in at 25. Have a look at these dew points, because I'm going to be showing you these again this week. And you can see in many cases we're in single digits. So those are low dew points. We've got a few double digits, but even low double digits. And it's really not till you get those dew points going up to the upper teens and into especially the 20s where it becomes oppressive and very humid. So it's comfortable right now. Well, those dew points will start creeping up a little bit for tomorrow, but they're going to be coming up a lot as we get towards Wednesday. The other thing starting tomorrow is the temperatures pushing towards 30 degrees and just above. So for tonight, those clear conditions Dwight's talking about, yeah, they're in place, and they're there for tomorrow as well. We're going to have lots of sunshine, but also a heat warning in place because of the temperatures, the humidex values, and even the overnight lows will be getting up closer to 20 degrees. So enjoy this. 15 tonight. I hope you enjoy this. 31 tomorrow with that sunshine, feeling like 34. So again, that's not too bad. But by the time we get into Wednesday, it's going to be feeling like we're in the upper 30s. So I'm going to tell you more about that and the storminess coming, Dwight, coming up.
Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
The weather is brought to you by Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. We test, so it runs. Take advantage of special offers now. It's hard to stop a Trane.
A man is facing charges tonight in a small community east of the GTA is reeling after an overnight shooting and arson. Emergency crews were called last night for reports of a shooting in the township of Parnham, which is about an hour north of Kingston. They found one person with minor injuries. A home had also been set on fire, the flames then spreading to an adjacent church. Both structures were destroyed early this morning. Police arrested a man at a home about half hour from the scene. 42-year-old Brian Daniel Mosher is now facing attempted murder, arson, and firearms charges. For one Brampton family, the fear of police brutality became a heartbreaking reality in April. DeAndre Campbell's parents are speaking out for the first time to CBC News about their 26-year-old son and how he was killed by Peel police in his own home. The Fifth Estate's Mark Kelly has the story.
As protests rage across Canada and the U.S., the Campbells quietly bury their dead. The unshakable bond of family ripped apart by 2 police officers and 2 bullets.
DeAndre is gone. And he's gone in a very sad way. A way in which we have now seemed to become familiar. The brutality of our young men by law enforcement.
It's not easy to bury your son when you know it's not corona or an accident or cancer or some crazy disease.
This is DeAndre Campbell celebrating his 26th birthday. It would be his last.
He had big dreams. He always said that, like, if I win the lottery, I'm gonna buy this, I'm gonna buy a car, I'm gonna buy a big house, you know. He always lived outside the box. He never looked at anything in a negative way.
But the young man with big dreams and a big heart was also struggling with schizophrenia. The family says they'd called police on 4 or 5 different occasions to take DeAndre to the hospital, concerned about his well-being.
Who called 911 that day?
DeAndre called 911 that day. Don't come and take someone's life when they call in for help.
It was Monday, April 6th, and the family was making dinner when there was a knock at the door. 2 officers from Peel Regional Police arrived answering DeAndre's call.
If he's looking for help and if he's the one that's calling, he shouldn't have ended up 6 feet under. Now when I have to walk to a graveside with my siblings, it hurts me to know that's the reason where I'm going for him. Like, that hurts. He didn't deserve it.
Here's what we know. The police arrived and found DeAndre in the kitchen holding a knife. After a brief encounter, the officers shocked DeAndre with their tasers. Moments later, one of the officers shot him dead.
How is that possible? The guy's not a criminal. He's not wanted. He only shoot down wanted people, right? Or they come in the house and murder him just like that.
Ontario's Special Investigations Unit, which independently examines all fatal police shootings in the province, is now looking into exactly what transpired in those last minutes of DeAndre Campbell's young life. This is a burning issue that is bigger than any one life. Protests across the country have given voice to the belief there is an anti-black, anti-Indigenous bias that has poisoned police forces from coast to coast to coast. A feeling now shared by the Campbell family.
Do you think that racism played a part in your son's death?
I think so. Yes. Racism is everywhere all over the world. It's here in Canada too. And we all have to put an eye on it and put a stop to it.
Days after the shooting death, police sources leaked details of the investigation to the Toronto Sun, saying DeAndre was agitated and they had to protect people in the home and themselves. Race, they insisted, was not a consideration. Citing the ongoing investigation, Peel Regional Police wouldn't tell us anything about the 2 officers who answered DeAndre's call for help that evening, nor would they explain why the department has a crisis intervention team to handle mental health calls, but didn't send them to the scene, even though DeAndre's mental health problems were well known to the police.
They shouldn't be going to a house with mental issue with guns. For what? They're going to fight a war? Why are they bringing guns? To deal with a mental issue.
And taser.
They're not going to war. They're going to kill.
You think he died because of a lack of experience and a lack of training?
A lack of everything. That whole night until the morning, literally out of all those officers, only one officer said, "My condolences." One officer. Nobody else did. How does that make you feel?
What are you hoping to get from that investigation?
Justice. This guy should get 26 years in prison. The same age as my son. He should do that time.
Because of the pandemic, the Campbells had to wait almost 2 months to bury their son. Gone, but not at peace.
It's time for us to rise up as a community, as people, and to say enough is enough. He's not the only one, and he won't be the last one, unless we stand to do something about it.
Mark Kelly, CBC News, Brampton.
In the wake of George Floyd's death, there have been renewed calls to defund police services. Next month, a motion to do just that will go before Toronto City Council. Greg Ross has more on the plan and reaction from the head of the police union.
We are gathered here today because we are here to represent everybody.
Just days after thousands took to the streets of Toronto to protest police brutality and anti-black racism, City Councillor Josh Matlow is leading a new charge to cut police funding by 10%. That's more than $120 million that he says could be used to support community resources.
Maybe we don't need police to do certain tasks, and where there might be alternatives to policing that might be able to de-escalate a situation better than having somebody with a uniform and a gun be the first person to arrive. And we've seen incidents that have turned into tragedies with our communities, including people who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color.
Today, the head of the union that represents police officers fired back.
It appears not to be a well thought out motion. It appears to be an emotional reaction to what's transpired over the last few weeks.
Mike McCormick says a cut of this magnitude would result in hundreds of jobs being lost.
We're looking at anywhere from 800 employees, 500 police officers.
But Matlow says there's no evidence to support those numbers.
Are you saying you don't believe there would be any job loss?
I'm saying I want to see the budgets and know whether or not what he's saying is true.
Batlow's motion specifically asks for more transparency. He says city councillors don't actually get to see how funding is allocated by Toronto Police. He believes they should have to break down spending line by line.
I think it's reasonable for them to demonstrate where there are efficiencies and savings. And listen, if they come back to us and can demonstrate where we see line by line that it's not possible, let's look at that.
When asked about that in a press conference today, the outgoing police chief said this.
We're listening to the community. If you've got an issue, you've got a concern, then let's sit down, let's have an informed discussion, not a knee-jerk discussion, but an informed discussion on where funds should be allocated.
Councillor Kristen Wong-Tam is supporting the motion, and they'll bring it before City Council next month. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
A newly released report is painting a picture of dysfunction at the Peel District School Board when it comes to dealing with decades of systemic racism. The report found Peel School Board administrators are ill-prepared to deal with anti-black racism and that the board and the director's office lack the ability or even the will to address the issue. Now, the report was commissioned after a review found issues of systemic racism within this board. Education Minister Stephen Lecce is giving the board 2 weeks to come up with a plan to address the problems or he will take further action. The Peel Board acknowledging today that anti-black racism is a problem it has failed to eradicate, but which it remains committed to ending. Still ahead, the Prime Minister weighs in on police body cameras. But first,
notice it says, "I can't breathe," and then surrounding the lettering says, "But we can hear you." And I think that's a testament to sort of the community coming together.
Toronto's graffiti alley changes within the times. With the times, we take our tour with the man who led the movement to bring black art to the alley next. A group of artists is using graffiti to show solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement. They chose Toronto's Graffiti Alley to display their support, but as Talia Ricci reports, the hope is that it grows beyond that location.
If you take a stroll through Graffiti Alley, you'll notice it's undergoing a transformation. It's part of a project called Paint the City Black, and we're going to meet one of the co-founders, Jesse Pacho.
When we started, we wanted to definitely use our skills to speak to something that was, greater than us or greater than graffiti in any sense. And so the one directive that we gave to people, or request anyway, was that they use black as one of the main colorways in the individual pieces. This panther is done by one of the other organizers of the event, Nick Sweetman. Yeah, it's personally one of the favorites in the event, so I definitely just wanted to start here to kick off the tour. This wall was done in a collaboration of 4 artists. So starting on the right side, we see a portrait done by Adrian Hales, a local Toronto artist, of Regis, who recently passed away in High Park. I actually did this piece here. So what the lettering says is Big Floyd, which is George Floyd's MC name. Moving over, we see a portrait right here done by a local artist named Bubs. And this portrait is really important for the community and the cause because this is another individual, Jamal Francique, who passed away under similar circumstances right here at home in Peel region.
It's really powerful that the graffiti community has responded so well. And I think it's the first time that I've really seen this alleyway be so alive for a cause that's greater than just painting beautiful things.
It's very powerful. It's one of the only portraits in the alleyway done with color. You'll notice it says, "I can't breathe," and then surrounding the lettering says, "But we can hear you." Art in itself and the nature of it is so transformative. I mean, the act of creating art is to transform something, right? And so that was the one thing we wanted, is just to really raise awareness for what exactly is happening in the world and to speak out against it.
So while this project started in Graffiti Alley, the founders are hopeful that this movement grows well beyond this location. They're asking any artists who want to participate, or for anyone who shares the work, to use the hashtag #PaintTheCityBlack. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
A 74-year-old cellist wanted to do his part during the pandemic to bring his community together.
I think the nicest way to connect is with music.
We'll introduce you to Conrad Blumendahl and bring you some of his performance after the break. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he's going to push for police across this country to start wearing body cams. The idea is to improve transparency by filming interactions with the public. David Cochrane looks at the sudden pressure to put cameras on our nation's cops.
This cell phone video shows an RCMP officer in Nunavut ramming an Inuit man with his truck before several more officers pile on to make an arrest.
The reality is that many people in this country simply do not feel protected by the police. In fact, they're afraid of them.
The Prime Minister thinks body cameras can help change that, starting with the RCMP wearing them.
Yes, it is something that is, in my opinion, what we need to move forward with.
This comes after massive protests against racial injustice and after a string of incidents like this arrest involving police and Indigenous men and women. In New Brunswick, a police officer shot and killed 26-year-old Chantel Moore. In Alberta, Athabasca Chippewan Chief Alan Adam saying the RCMP roughed him up in a parking lot.
I think the Prime Minister wading into the issue is appropriate, and I think he's captured the moment.
This police officer turned researcher says having a video record is crucial.
When we talk about police accountability, we're talking about people being able to see with their own two eyes what a police officer has done.
Body cameras may improve accountability, but there's no consensus they reduce the use of force.
If we turn to the U.S., we see a number of police services that have implemented the use of body cameras, but clearly that hasn't changed anything. As it was noted during George Floyd's unfortunate incident, the police officer did have a body camera.
Body cameras have been studied in the past, but never acted on, largely due to cost. The Prime Minister is now making it clear that should change. David Cochrane, CBC News, Ottawa.
As of midnight tonight, there will be an easing of restrictions on entering this country to be with immediate family members.
Immediate family members will be defined as spouses, common law partners, dependent children and their children, parents, and legal guardians. Immediate family members must plan to stay in Canada for at least 15 days.
The first 14 of those days must be spent in quarantine. Foreign nationals who are ill, have symptoms of COVID-19, or reason to believe they may have the virus are still barred from entry. So too are those who just want a quick visit or to check on their property in Canada. Those who qualify for the exemption must have a visa or electronic authorization. The ban was first imposed in March and remains in place for most until at least June 21st. The minister says the decision has the support of provincial governments. A new COVID-19 assessment center for migrant workers is opening its doors near Windsor.
So as we come through here, obviously there'll be a greeting. We will have interpreters on site that will be able to explain exactly what the process is and what they can expect once they're inside.
This is the new center in Leamington. Health workers will be testing for COVID-19 and providing care for the roughly 8,000 migrant workers in the area. The move comes after the death of 2 migrant workers in the last 2 weeks. 400 of the workers have tested positive for the disease. A TDSB teacher delivered hundreds of face shields to EVA's initiatives for homeless youth and Participation House in Markham.
1,200 parts later, we have over 300 face shields ready to go and assembled.
We're really grateful for Victor and for his team for putting this together because it just means that we have access to the materials that we really need.
The teacher created the masks in his lab at George Vanier with the help of the school board and various other community members. The masks will help staff at both EVA's and Participation House stay safe and stop the spread of COVID-19. A 74-year-old cellist felt disconnected during this pandemic, so he wanted to do something about it. Conrad Blumendahl decided to take his love for music and play a live concert for his neighbors in Tarragon Village, hoping to bring his community together.
Hello, everybody. I'm Conrad Blumendahl. I'm going to play a little program for you on the cello. I've had a career of about 50 years. played all over the world, made a lot of recordings, played with a lot of Canadian groups and Canadian artists. I decided to do this because people in this difficult time first needs to be a bit cheered up, and music will always do that. And a friend suggested, why don't you play out on your nice balcony?
Really enjoyed it, and it was such a lovely gift to the neighborhood. It was just a delight.
It's got a really intense sound that kind of almost mesmerizes you, so even for me I could just feel it coursing through my bones, and really it's just, you can't speak, it's just a magical instrument. So it was really beautiful to have this in my front yard and to have it echoing throughout the community.
Well, I mean, everybody's doing everything online now. There's all streaming, and I don't feel really like doing that because I always believe in live music. But I hadn't thought of this until a friend said, you can play out there. What it means to me is to connect with people again after all these months and months of just sitting inside and only talking on the phone with people. I think the nicest way to connect is with music.
Come on, when you play that well, you have to share. That was beautiful. The heat is sticking around for a few days. Colette's back after the break with a look at your long-range forecast. Stay with us. We are back in just a few minutes. What is now tropical depression Cristobal is making its way north through the U.S. today. Heavy rains and storm surge posing a major threat after it made landfall yesterday in Louisiana. It led to flooding in the central Gulf Coast. Isolated tornadoes are a possibility for Mississippi, Alabama, and parts of Tennessee and Missouri. Cristobal is the earliest third named storm of the season. Actually on record at this point. And I was saying, I had to ask Colette how to pronounce that one because I wasn't sure if it Cristobal. And Ken, Erica, and Sandy, my siblings, they've all had storms named for them, but Cristobal is a new one.
Cristobal's a new one. I don't remember a Colette or a Dwight.
No.
It doesn't mean it hasn't happened. And as we were talking about, the next one, and you know, it's likely to come, will be Dolly. But yes, this is Cristobal. Tropical depression at this point, and the winds right now are over 50 kilometers an hour, between 50 and 60. But really what's still impressive is you can see that circulation here. So the storm surge, a big problem with this, but also that severe weather, including a tornado right into downtown Orlando. So you can imagine how far-reaching this has been, the effects of it all the way over towards Florida, and they're still looking at that kind of active weather tonight. And I'll tell you, this is going to come together with another system approaching us, and by Wednesday, I have my own concerns for us about some severe weather, and it's going to be partly because of Cristobal. Temperatures, though, we know this, going up tomorrow and for Wednesday. The humidity really up by Wednesday, too, so we do have that heat warning. Stormy conditions early in the day, but especially some of the more intense storms could be late into the late afternoon and evening hours. And then, hey, a drop in temperatures at the end of the week. We're not supposed to be doing so much seesawing. We're into June now. It's not spring. Well, I guess it still is. We got till the 20th, till it's officially summer, right? These are your current temperatures. There's not much humidity, so I'm not even going to go into the humidex values, but they'll be going up, just creeping for Tuesday, really feeling it into Wednesday when it's going to feel like we're in the mid to upper 30s. But we're going to have sunshine for tomorrow, so it's actually going to be a really nice day with that heat. Wednesday is when things start to change. This is early Wednesday morning. You see some of the raininess coming through, some embedded storms, but with some daytime heating in here in the mid part of the day, and then that destabilizing the atmosphere, and then a cold front coming in later, that's where I see us getting into a risk of getting into some really active weather, and I'll be watching that carefully for us on Wednesday. Tonight, that's okay. Comfortable mid-teens for your overnight temperatures. Here's the heat for tomorrow. There's your average. Yeah, almost 10 degrees above. That cool down, too, I mentioned at the end of the week. You see that by the time we get to Saturday, Dwight, we may only be in the upper teens.
Yeah, for the weekend. That doesn't seem fair, but we'll talk about that later in the week.
Yeah, let's leave it where it is.
Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
Hot Docs handed out its prizes after taking the festival online this year. Yelena Adzik joins us now. So, Yelena, let's start with the winner of the top prize, the Walrus and the Whistleblower.
Yes. Okay. Well, this is the Audience Choice Award. So, Dwight, I brought a little bit of an audience. Here's a bench with these are my friends now that COVID's going on, Dwight. I wanted to talk about this movie because so many people out there love it. So let's take a look at it right now as we talk about the fact that this is a whistleblower named Phil Demers. He is someone who made a lot of headlines. And I'm going to start by showing you a snippet of a news item with a famous face you'll recognize, and then show you a little more of this documentary.
Smooshy is a walrus who lives at Niagara Falls Marineland.
The only way really to do a story like Marineland is to have an insider. That was Phil Demers, the first whistleblower.
Over the course of my tenure at Marineland, I was witness to things that people would never imagine.
In response, now, something else that people could never imagine, Dwight, is what happened immediately after this film was released. It was released on Thursday, and then this happened. Have a listen to the director, Nathalie Bibot.
Yes, well, the film went to air on a Thursday, and on Monday we learned that Smooshy, the walrus, who's one of the characters in the film, had given birth. And this was a shock to the entire world, and including to the main character in the film, who was her trainer for over 10 years. And so the whole world's just been reeling, or anyone who's been following this story is shocked to hear it.
And so now the big fight is to protect also the baby. So this is really something that is fascinating to follow. And there are still some tickets left if you want to see it at Hot Docs, but also it's available on CBC Gem, the streaming service. So that's good to know too, Dwight.
Yeah, I mean, we had that story on the news, some of the issues at Marineland. And you have another strong local story that nabbed some hardware?
Yes, you got to listen to this. So sharing in the top 5 picks from the audience, there's no place like this place, any place. And this is all about a landmark where the director herself actually lives. Her name is Lulu Wei. And have a listen to this documentary so you can get a feel for it now.
I don't know how often it is that an entire city block is evacuated at the same time.
When my dad came here from Portugal, they couldn't afford anything. So Honest Ed's, they always come here. Now I'm taking down my dad's memories too.
It takes us behind the scenes looking at gentrification, but not just about Honest Ed's. There is a success story in here, Dwight. For a lot of people who've been fighting for this, there is a very important bookstore to a lot of Torontonians. And I spoke with the director about that. So here's Lulu Wei.
I think the best success story in all of this is the fact that a different book list, which has been on Bathurst for 25 years, it's the Black-owned bookstore and now a cultural center, they get to stay in the block. And I think that's just amazing that, you know, they're going to have a physical space to have their cultural center and carry on the legacy of the Black community at Bloor and Bathurst.
And, you know, Dwight, I have to say, I myself lived there for many years, and it really is a community that's been so open and welcoming to immigrants. So it has been quite sad for many people to watch what's been happening, but this is an important doc that covers it all. So again, that's called There's No Place Like This Place, Any Place. It's one of the top picks from the audience at Hot Docs, and you can still get tickets. They're about $9 each, or you can wait until September because CBC will be airing that documentary in the fall. So yeah, heavy hitting, but really, really moving as well.
I've spent a lot of time at Honest Ed's as a kid with my mom and as an adult at a different book list. So love that corner. Thank you for this, Yelena.
Yeah, we'll see you soon, Dwight.
Staff at Markham Stouffville Hospital call Audrey Laurie one of the most dedicated, caring people you'll ever meet. She is an environmental services attendant at the hospital. Jada Myers, a nurse in the hospital's COVID-19 assessment center, tells us she doesn't sit down or stop. She does not complain, only wants to help. She will go and help other units if they are in need and continue to work her full shift with us. We couldn't function without her. The place is so clean and cared for because of her. She is a true hero. So shout out tonight to Miss Audrey Laurie, and thank you for what you're doing there up at the hospital. Colette?
Yeah, it looks like she has a sense of humor there, Audrey, too. It looks like she was about to do a little curtsy in her pee. But I want to talk again about the heat warning. So you know this is in place. It gets hot on Tuesday, but Wednesday it's hot and humid. So all these areas from York, Durham through the city, Niagara region up towards Barrie, Bruce Peninsula and southwestern Ontario. So you do need to take it easy and be mindful of that. But know that Tuesday, tomorrow, is actually going to be a really nice day, just hot. And also know that Wednesday we have a chance of seeing some severe weather. So I'll be watching that carefully, Dwight.
Saturday, Sunday. Thanks, Colette. That is our show for tonight. Marvel Turuk has your next local news tonight at 11, right after the National. We will see you back here tomorrow at 6. Have a great night and stay safe out there, everybody.